Hey, y'all, we are back. Welcome to another episode of Poly Side Eye, episode 52. Welcome, Jared, again.
Oh, good to see you again.
Yeah, so, there's a lot going on, but obviously, I want to talk about the Jimmy Kimmel thing. We talked about this on Pop Bros, but, there's always a political aspect to this. So, yeah. Um, This all started out, if you don't know, Jimmy Kimmel said a joke involving Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump. And afterward, his show was taken off the air indefinitely. And if you heard the joke, did you see the clip?
I didn't see the clip, but I read a transcript.
Okay, so basically what he was saying was that it wasn't even talking about Charlie Kirk. It was more so talking about Donald Trump. Like, instead of him actually caring about this man getting killed, he was more so worried about his gold room or whatever. And that was the joke. I was like, is that it? And for some reason, I found it very unsettling because we already saw like another show that was taken off the air, like I felt like the government was too involved in that. At this point, the president is talking about late night talk
What
show.
was this?
What happened?
What you say there? Wait, you said there was another show that was taken off the air?
Yeah, Stephen Colbert.
Oh yeah, but
It had a lot to do. I feel like
I feel like people are reading up more into that than they probably should have. But we can talk about that later.
yeah. I felt strongly about it. And I said, I'm sorry to all the people that I'm sharing my Disney Plus with, but I'm not going to renew it. And it hurt for me because
Again, I have to say, when X-Men 97 comes out next year, and you still have if you are watching the show, I'm gonna call you out for not voicing. I'm just saying.
But as we saw an hour ago, it was announced that Jimmy Kimmel is coming back on air.
I'm just saying.
And then I have Plex too. And that's all I need to say on that. I'm not about to get, blow up my spot on here. But yeah, it's tough for me because a new Marvel show is coming out this week. And yeah, I had to put my like aside. And look, it's the little things that I can do. I just canceled my Disney, and I know other people that have Hulu, so I don't know. I can enjoy that.
Yeah, we know. I've shared my great. Well, if people who follow me on Substack, I did a whole video essay explaining why I don't think boycotts do the things that we think they do. So I'll spare everyone my soapbox about that. But I still think people should do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of which, y'all, I know Jared might have an opinion that you don't like. Let me just say that it is okay. You don't have to agree. We're just, providing, Jared is providing nuance to a situation and, with his expertise in his field. So, you don't got to call him a Republican. You ain't got to call him like, a traitor or something like that. Like, it is what it is. Like, we just here to talk. We can have a conversation. You don't have to attack him in the comments.
And also, I'm literally just one person that has no power whatsoever to change any of these things we're talking about by myself. So even if you thought that I had some influence in some way, I don't. So you should take that also into consideration if you get upset with my opinion. So
yes. And, if you want to go back and watch the Amanda video where, a lot of those comments were, please do, because we are almost at 5,000 views. Thank y'all for watching us. That's going to be our most viewed video. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we just need to talk about Amanda Seales more often. Maybe that's the secret sauce.
I'm good. I'm good on that. But yes, going back to me just feeling like just different about this cancellation, because it just felt like the government was involved in him getting pulled off the air. It just felt really, really unsettling to me personally. So this is where I'm asking the question, because a lot of people protested, and it just feels like, are we headed towards fascism? And before you respond, I just want to let people know some qualities of, the definition of fascism. So,
according to whom? What's the source?
Well, I Googled it.
Was it like Google, like the AI feature?
I mean, well, they basically gave me characteristics of fascism, which include extreme nationalism, uh, uh, dictatorial rule, and suppression of opposition, militarism, um, populism and elite collaboration, a cult of tradition and purity, um, yeah, rejection of liberalism and socialism. That's what I've just been seeing, like a couple characteristics of fascism. But yeah,
Okay, so that's not really helpful in the sense that that's saying a lot without saying anything at all. I actually don't like using the term fascism to just describe things that we don't like, which I feel like that's typically what it's used for. Kind of similar to how I feel about people just using capitalism as a pejorative. People just throw out capitalism whenever it's just something bad happens, rich people, billionaires, they're just like, oh, capitalism. I'm just like, that's not really helpful. Like, so if you want to think about these terms like meaningfully, then you have to think about like what they've meant historically. So like fascism was emerged out of a very particular moment kind of in world history. So typically people, I would say most historians who are worth, whose work is worth reading, would say that fascism really arises in Italy during the Mussolini regime, kind of in the lead up to World War II. So in between World War I and World War II, most people know that that capitalism was more or less seemingly, or at least people thought capitalism was on its last legs. You had the Great Depression in the United States. You had the worst inflation ever seen in Germany, which gives rise to the Nazi regime. So across
that too, though, I didn't go over that part, but it does say the origins of fascism on here too.
Do they talk about the capitalism part?
They said the term fascism comes from the Italian word fascio, meaning bundle, and the fasces, a symbol of authority in ancient Rome, featuring a bundle of rods tied around an axe. This symbolizes the strength of unity under a single authority. Then they go into Benito Mussolini, the founder of Italy's National Fascist Party in 1919, is credited coining the term. His regime, which lasted from 1922 to 1943, serves as a primary example of historical fascism. Then they get into Hitler, Germany, and Francisco Franco, Spain. This is a history lesson. You probably know more about this than me.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need to. I mean, the average person doesn't need to know all that. The upshot of fascism is it emerges out of the degradation or capitalism really being in a very precarious situation, which it was in between World War I, which was 1917, roughly the end of it, and World War II, which was in the mid 1930s. In between then, you had all these depressions. People were losing everything. Inequality was pretty much out of control. You had people using Wall Street as a casino, essentially. And you had all these crashes. And when you have economic inequality, when you have economic crashes of these sorts under capitalism, it creates mass discontent. It makes people feel uneasy. It makes them feel anxious. And out of that, you get all sorts of crazy shit. You get xenophobia, you get nationalism, you get racism, you get crazy expressions of white supremacy. So I feel like the issue that we have in our country is that we talk about all of that we talk about the racism, the white supremacy, the xenophobia, and all of that, but we don't talk about like what the origins of it is. And the origins of it is the fact that, again, when capitalism is degrading in that way, in the sense that what's happening is that there are fewer and fewer opportunities for people to make a return on their investment. And so like, because of that, you're starting to get more and more inequality, because the people who do have wealth are essentially trying to do whatever they can to get a return on their investment. Now, they're not doing it like purposely. It's because all of the institutions are set up such that they operate with the expectation of growth and the expectation that people will get a return on their investment. But when that doesn't happen, you end up with all sorts of economic issues. So that's the conditions that give rise to fascism. Now, fascism is one potential solution to this problem of capitalism, the other being, of course, socialism. The other being, okay, like maybe having a system, especially at a global level, that's predicated upon endless growth in accumulation of wealth. Maybe that's not a good idea, especially if that means turning large swaths of the population into paupers, essentially, which is what ends up happening. And so like maybe what we should do is like try to reorganize our society such that we produce the things we need, not necessarily just producing shit for the sake of producing it. And so socialism is always about prioritizing human need and not prioritizing the accumulation of, well, capital accumulation, essentially, on the other. But obviously, if you're wealthy, you don't want the socialist solution, like, because the system as it exists has worked for you. So like you do what you can to ensure that capitalism can be maintained for as long as possible. And under fascism, what ends up happening is that fascism becomes a very blunt instrument, a very aggressive tool to ensure that you actually have the conditions necessary for capitalism to prosper. So what's the main condition you need for capitalism to prosper? You need people who sell their labor in exchange for a wage. You need people to work. And so when people aren't willing to work for whatever reason, because the pay isn't good enough, because the conditions are shitty, whatever, like they're typically either going to retaliate against that or they're going to try to change the system. And so fascism is essentially a retaliation against any type of change to the structure of capitalism. Now, this has happened not just in, the European setting, but some people have said maybe it's coming to America. I would say that America is not necessarily fascist. It's authoritarian for sure. But the reason I would hesitate to say fascism is because typically the key component of fascism is whenever the state takes complete control over the entire productive apparatus of the economy. That hasn't happened in the slightest, mainly because the United States government doesn't even have the capacity to do that. And so I don't think that calling it fascism is really going to do anything more than just fearmonger. So rather, what I think we should try to do is try to think about what's unique to our current moment, as opposed to like trying to find these like historical examples to be like, oh, it's that. And then just like us again, calling anything that we think is bad fascism. I just don't think it's a really helpful.
What's the difference? Like, because you said like authoritarianism and fascism. Isn't that kind of in the same lane, or what's the main difference?
So I would say fascism is a form of authoritarianism. So authoritarianism, I think we've talked about this before.
You are leaning more towards that.
Well, I wouldn't say more or less, maybe slightly, but so authoritarianism really is, capitalism is an authoritarian system in the sense that the way that I think about authoritarianism is, how are decisions made? So there's multiple ways to make political decisions. You can make political decisions democratically, which just means, I'm teaching philosophy this semester. So what does democracy means? It means the demos, the people. It means that everybody has a say in whatever decision is being made. That's kind of the democratic idea. If that's not the case, if everyone doesn't get a say in political decisions that are getting made, decisions still have to get made somehow. If it's just, let's say, decisions are made within a certain handful of people or handful of institutions, then we might say that it's authoritarian decision making, in the sense that the authority is vested in one or a handful of institutions, which I would say is true for America. We don't get to decide what we produce in our society. We don't get to decide whether or not the society goes to war. We don't get to decide interest rates if we feel like, credit is how credit is true. We don't get to decide any of those things. So all of those things are decided either by corporations or the state or both of them. And so I'm like saying, are we now entering an authoritarian period? I'm like, well, we've always kind of been an authoritarian, especially under monopoly capitalism. So like, what are we really talking about? So now the question might be, has the spectacle around authoritarianism gotten more extreme? Absolutely. But I don't think we should, again, people are going to get upset and say I'm downplaying this, but like, we have to understand that we live in a society, and I've just read this book a couple of weeks ago, and I would highly suggest it. It's called Constructing the Political Spectacle by Murray Edelman. And he was a political scientist who wrote in the mid 20th century, so from the 60s to like the late 70s, really into the 80s too. And what he talks about in that book is we need to understand that, especially in the United States, the electoral system is set up such that the two parties really agree on like the basic ideas about the trajectory of American economic development, in the sense that they both agree that America will be the global empire, i.e. we should say will be, should be. They kind of think the two are one and the same. They're going to do whatever they have to do to ensure that America stays, quote unquote, the number one global superpower, and that it remains capitalist. Like, that's the two things that they are going to be the most concerned about. And so because they agree on like the two most fundamental aspects about American political economy, they have to figure out other methods of like trying to distinguish themselves among the public, to give the public an impression that they are in fact radically different, even though they aren't. And so that's where the spectacle comes in. So like each of the parties essentially has a vested interest in constructing this narrative that the other side poses like some fundamental threat to the society, in that in order to protect the society, you need to support that party. And what I'm here to tell you is that people need to stop getting subsumed and sucked into that spectacle, because that's how the status quo kind of remains. We get sucked into believing that what we see on television, and forgetting the fact that the television the whole media apparatus is a business. It's structured around presenting whatever information will get people as riled up as possible, because that's what generates most engagement. That's the whole business model of the whole media ecosystem. And so, of course, the spectacle is going to be in such a way to present things as though the world is ending, as though it's hopeless, as though there's nothing you can do about it, to essentially get people to doom scroll. Because when you doom scroll, you see more advertisements, which means you're more likely to buy things, which means you're more likely to not actually talk to other people and do the sort of things that are required to actually bring about social change. And so I just want us to like understand all of that, because I feel like we keep falling for the okie doke.
I mean, you did mention that word spectacle, because, this past Thursday, me and him were like going at it through text. So I'm just like, I am just weary from all of this, and look, I get it. I mean, we're human. I feel like it is just unsettling to me that, I would say our government is just so, what I'm trying to say, like our government and like influence in the media and what we watch, and like, people going off the air for just saying something that is against what, who's currently in office, what they have to say. And it just felt a little like
we're leaving out an important component, which is the fact that the news media is privately owned, which means that.
Right, exactly.
So my whole thing is, why are we calling out the fact that these media companies are owned by corporations in which the only people whose decisions matter are the board of supervisors or the board of the head investors for Disney? They're the only ones who get to make a decision that impacts all 340 whatever million people in America, because we have just accepted or taken for granted that it's okay that corporations essentially can. And we say it's the government, but it's really the corporations. I mean, they're working in tandem in the sense that we have elections. So I saw Rich the Fish says that we have representative democracy. In theory, yes, but in practice, we know that we have the best elections that money can buy, and that we know that if you are not contributing millions upon millions to these candidates, your voice is likely not being heard. Or if the candidates don't believe that not supporting a policy or supporting a policy, whichever way, if they don't believe that they're going to face some type of electoral consequence from doing that, they don't give a shit about you. Which is why they essentially respond to the corporate lobbyists, because they're really at this point, the lobbying firms pretty much write all of the policy in America, in the sense that that's why they pay all of this money to construct the policies that are going to be beneficial to what's necessary for Disney to make more money than it did the quarter prior. And it's not just because they're greedy. It's not just because they're evil. As I've said before, it might be the case that everybody who works at Disney is evil and greedy. But the problem is that the legal fiduciary responsibilities, the fiduciary duty of these big corporations is to ensure that they make more money for their investors this quarter than they did last quarter. And my whole thing is, can we talk about that? Like, can we make that a problem? Can we actually debate about why is that the case? Because as long as that's the case, everything else beyond that is going to be kind of beside the point, because ABC will always be able to come back and say, we had to do whatever was necessary to ensure that our investors made more return on the investment this quarter than they did last quarter. And if we don't want every single question in our society to have to be subsumed to this very basic question of accumulating capital, then we're never going to be able to address any social problem, because that was the whole critique of capitalism by Marx and all of these other thinkers, which is, under capitalism, we want to do all of these social things. We want to address all these social ills and whatnot. But in capitalism, we can't do that, because the questions of what's important socially always is subsumed to what is needed to accumulate capital. And my whole thing is, like, it doesn't have to be that question. We could change the question. We could raise new questions, but we keep focusing on what I think are symptoms and not the actual issue, which is, again, the fact that we've constructed this system oriented towards endless accumulation of capital.
I feel like the average person, though, doesn't really think about that. And
yeah, but you think about it you do think about it, you just don't realize it. When people say things like, how many times have we been at work and something, happens and people are just like, we've conducted business with somebody, and one of the parties will just say, it's just business. Like, I'm just doing business. I'm just doing my job. So we do know this, in the sense that that's an example of that, where people want to do better, but because of societal forces, they feel like they can't. And my whole thing is, if we actually could change the way that we relate to each other socially, we could actually do that. But because we just accept that things have to be that way, that everything has to be about accumulating capital, then we can't ask any of these other social questions, because everything that's prioritized, and we always prioritize that one thing. And I do think people realize this at a fundamental. They may not have all the language and the terminology, but how many times have we found ourselves in situations where, if not for the imperative of getting a paycheck, or if not for the imperative of needing to make money, we probably would have done something differently. We probably would have acted in a more socially gregarious way or altruistic way, as opposed to, we have to chase the bag, essentially. And my whole thing is like, okay, let's construct a society where everybody doesn't feel as though they have to chase the bag.
Well,
and that's
we're going to get that
include corporate. But it's not about anytime soon. It's about pausing and recognizing that is our task as a humanity, and we're not gonna, most of us, let's just be real. If you're in this chat right now, you're not gonna live to see the fruits of this. But we do have to start figuring out a way as a society to say, okay, the way that we've socialized ourselves to believe that this is the way it has to be, we have to at least begin to give ourselves the opportunity to question these things. This is not an election cycle concern. This is like, can we do this to save humanity? If you have children, if you have grandchildren, or you expect to have children, these are questions you should be concerning yourselves with, because the politicians are never going to talk about this. This is going to be something that we do for ourselves.
I just think the issue with that is, if we want real change like that, everybody is going to have to be uncomfortable, like get uncomfortable with their livelihoods. They're going to have to make these huge sacrifices. And I don't think people are ready to do that.
Well, a lot of people are doing it regardless if they don't want to. How many people are losing their jobs right now because this job market is shitty? So the decision is going to be made for a lot of people, because the economy, regardless of what they tell you on the TV, it's not getting better. And
so it's going to be worse before it gets better.
Well, that's assuming it gets better. I'm not so sanguine about that. And my whole thing is like, people may not want to do it, but like eventually these conversations are going to be forced upon people whenever they realize. I was just literally watching I was reading an article in the Financial Times last week, and everybody's concerned because they're just like, we don't know what to do because we actually don't need people. There aren't really people don't need to do these jobs. Like we don't need the work. Like until like we're going to have a growing segment of the population where the work their labor is not valuable in the sense that it's not needed for capitalism. So you're going to have more and more people who are going to find themselves in the position of, out here not realizing, completely alienated. And my whole thing is like, I just want to begin to give people the space to actually question things as opposed to just like accepting the terms of the debate as presented in the mainstream media, because that's really what's going to happen in the sense that all of these things I've just mentioned are never going to be mentioned by anybody on the mainstream media. And if they are mentioned, it's going to be in a very like opaque way or obliquely. It's not going to be kind of on the nose. And so again, people are just going to continue to focus on the spectacle, get more depressed, feel more hopeless, when what we need to do is talk to each other and try to understand this world so that we can hopefully try to change it.
Mm-hmm. Well, getting back to the surface topic, the pop culture portion, Jimmy Kimmel's show is coming back tomorrow, and I'm wondering, like, what do you think of that? Like, did boycotting work, or what do you think was behind that decision to bring him back after all this backlash?
Disney probably had their research team, their accounting team figure out exactly how much this is going to affect them in the long run, probably doing all sorts of projections, for their quarterly numbers. All of these companies, the only thing they care about is the balance sheet. So like,
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So like, my whole thing is, did the boycotts work? I'm like, what? Again, kind of when we talked about the boycotts against Target, I'm like, what will we try? Work at doing what? Like, are we just trying to? That's why I'm never clear about what the aim of the boycotts are. Like, usually it's just some vague notion of I want to send a message. I'm just like, who are you sending a message to? Like, who is the audience? Because I can assure you that the CEO of Disney does not really care whether or not you cancel your Disney Plus account.
Well, here's the basis thing of it. Like, I would love to know people in the chat who did like cancel their Hulu or cancel their Disney subscription. Why did you do it? I did it because I didn't like the fact that because of what he said, like, that wasn't even offensive, got taken off the air because of that. I just didn't like it. Like, just plain and simple. Like anything political or whatever, I just didn't like it. And it didn't feel right in my spirit. So I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to support this, and that's the only ththing I can do as a consumer of their product. That's the only reason I did it.
So, I mean, I don't think that made a difference in the grand scheme of things. But if you just wanted to feel good about that.
It made me feel better because I'm not going to support it.
Again, I've said before, like, if people just want catharsis, if they just want to feel like they're doing something, emphasis in the feel, then sure, feel however you want. Like, but let's not think that that's actually like affecting politics.
Is it fair to say that it doesn't do anything? Because what if 10 million people felt that way?
Okay, so all right, let's imagine. First off, ABC is too big to fail at this point. So like Disney, that is too. If Disney, let's imagine there was a world in which Disney, the cancellation of all these accounts did in fact bring the whole corporation to its knees. They would get a bailout from the government anyway, because they're systemic risk at this point, in the sense that if Disney failed, it would actually bring capitalism down, and the government can't have that. Just like why the big banks are too big to fail, the big tech firms are too big to fail. So Meta, Amazon, Disney, Walmart, probably the pharmaceuticals, they're too big, they're too monopolized, they employ too many people. And that's the thing. People forget that hurting a corporation means hurting the workers essentially, because the way that corporations deal with downturns is laying people off. And so like they're not gonna hurt their like, you think they're gonna hurt their wealth? They're not gonna let this hurt their wealth. They're gonna just lay people off and close stores or what are, cancel whatever. They're gonna cut back on labor, because labor costs are the only thing that's the only thing that corporations often feel like they can do anything about, is cutting back on labor costs. So, so sure, it hypothetically, maybe it does lead to lower returns for Q3. Maybe that's the case. If that's the case, the people who are going to be affected by that most directly are going to be probably lower level employees at Disney, not the wealthy shareholders.
So I think the people in the chat, including me, because you're getting them riled up a little bit, it was like, so if it didn't matter, why did they bring him back on in the first place?
I didn't say it didn't matter. I'm just saying, like, that's not what people think, that these things are causal. And what I'm saying is, A, we don't know that. So we shouldn't just be projecting these things onto these decisions. Like, it's all gonna be shrouded in ideology. And so like that, we can't just assume the timing of these things necessarily means that that's how these things work. Like, that's, I think, probably what happened again is they were like, okay, let's just like evaluate the situation. Are we actually going to get this thing to happen? Or are we going to get some of these affiliates to back out? See what's going on, like evaluate what the cost is. And, if it seems like, we can just kind of give us some space to think for a minute. That's the way I kind of read that. Also, late night television is becoming a ratings like drag. So like they probably want to probably going to get rid of all these shows, with all of them, in the next 5 years or so, because nobody watches them anymore.
I would agree with that.
Advertisers are leaving the late night block in droves because there's no money to be made from it. And so I think more of it was just, ABC probably trying to save face a little bit, but like I don't think they ultimately cared that much about. And Disney has also been like essentially systematically de-emphasizing their streaming platforms, because they just bought all the rights to all these, NFL games and ESPN. So like that's their big cash cow. So like the streaming component is such a small drop in the bucket at this point. Like it's not really that big of a concern to them.
And remember, I sent you that video about, someone working in news. They explain how like it's not just ABC, but it's the affiliates and the people who, bought out the affiliates that like, oh, well, we don't want to show this, and ABC's hand is kind of tied a little bit. I just thought that was an interesting aspect too, because not a lot of people know about, how that all works in television. But
yeah, again, the root problem is that all of these decisions are privately made. So like technically they can do whatever we want, because we don't own none of this, and so we don't have any say on none of this. That's the big gag, in the sense that on one hand, the ideology is that this is a democracy and like we all have a say. Mm-hmm. But in reality, all of these institutions are privately owned and operated, and so they can do whatever the fuck they want as long as it's legally permissible, which most of the things they do are. So like, if we don't want that to be the case, we need to have a rewriting of the Constitution, which Thomas Jefferson himself said that, we're going to write this Constitution, but at some point y'all going to have to figure out a new one for yourselves. So when y'all get to that point, just go ahead and have a revolution and write a new Constitution. He says this in the Declaration of Independence. And so if that's the case, there needs to be a whole fundamental overhaul of the Constitution. And second, we need to not take for granted the fact that the whole media ecosystem is privately owned and operated.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
I want to point out some comments. Like, I also thought about this. Like, I don't even watch Jimmy Kimmel's show. It was just more so just the action of what happened that just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I can't remember the last time I watched Jimmy Kimmel's show in its entirety. Maybe if there was like a musical guest that I liked, but I never watched this man's show. It was just more so because I didn't like the act of that. Because what if just YouTube demonetizes this video just because like we're discussing fascism or like
well, we've talked before. There's certain things where you say that if I mention certain things, I get demonetized. That's censorship,
right? Because I'll be like, yeah, you can't say
so
that.
Why do we accept that? Why do we accept that?
Well, it's more so just specific words just to get out the way. I feel like we can still put our point across without saying those particular words, which I do agree is silly, but you know, a bag is a bag is a bag.
So here's my thing with censorship. My thing with censorship.
Oh yeah, because we were talking about this too. Just want to, because you said you knew.
Okay.
No, I was saying what our conversation was about earlier this week about censorship, and you were telling me that there's nothing new when it comes to censorship.
So here's the thing with censorship. There's a really great book called Private Government by Elizabeth Anderson. She's a liberal philosopher. I don't love all her work. Sometimes it's too sentimental. You know how I feel about sentimental stuff. But I do like Private Government because she raises the question about in America, we're always talking about government, how it's suppressing our freedoms, this, that, and the other. But like we just tacitly accept that for the majority of our lives, we agree to suppress our freedoms at work. Like in the sense that our employers tell us how to dress. They tell us what time we have to be there. They tell us what time we can leave. They tell us what time we can take a break. They can tell us whether or not we can use our phones most of the times. If you work for Amazon or you work for those or for different couriers, you're often tracked. So you're highly surveilled. They tell us when we can go on vacation, when we can see our loved ones. How long we can take time off with our newborns. Like private corporations have all of this power, which is censorship. It's censoring our dress. It's censoring our expression. It's censoring our creativity. It's censoring our sense of place. It's censoring all sorts of things, and we just accept that. Now, what she's going to pose and say is the problem is that when you take all of that for granted, you then feel as though you only have one other thing to kind of displace or to direct all of your grievances, which is at the government. When she argues is that, we should talk about the government aspect too, but we shouldn't just forget about the corporate side too, because that's where we spend most of our time. That's where we spend most of our days. And people will then say, oh, well, I need a job. I have to do what I have to do. Sure, yes, you do. But like in accepting that, what we're ultimately doing is depoliticizing so much of the way that we live our lives. And that's why I'm always saying that we really need to start having conversations about about socialism, because socialism is all about like dealing with this alienation at work and how it manifests in all sorts of ways that harm us elsewhere. We talked about how that affects our dating lives. Oftentimes people don't want to date because dating is exhausting after you spend all this time being censored at work, and then you have to go out. Or schools, like I think schools are some of the most authoritarian institutions in our country, in the sense that it essentially all schools really do is like prepare you to learn how to like take orders at work. And so like we spend all of our time in these authoritarian institutions being censoring our speech, our creativity, our dress, all of these things. But we draw the line at Jimmy Kimmel getting ranked. Yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't have that shouldn't be a problem. That should be a problem too. My whole thing is like, why don't we talk about these other things? Like, that's what I want to politicize. That's what I want to talk about. And I want to tie it all together and to show how when we just focus on what's going on late night television and miss all of this other stuff that we take for granted, we significantly narrow the realm of politics, where we could actually change a lot of things that we have a lot of control over. A lot of us are, in our communities, we can actually affect our school boards. We can actually affect school policies. We can actually affect things like that. And we just don't even talk about any of that.
I mean, I see what you're saying. You're saying that, the general public is complaining about this like censorship when we're actually censored every day and we don't even realize it. I just thought that
self-censored.
Yeah, I mean, I get that that's something great, to know, but I just felt like, with this, it felt like a slippery slope to me, where it's just like, okay, well, this is definitely, proof that it could trickle down to other sorts of media, just like how Tamara is saying in the comments.
I agree, and I agree wholeheartedly. The question is, what do you do about that? Mm-hmm. Because we're not in a position to do anything at the FCC level. I've said before, you cannot depend on the Democratic Party for anything. That ship has long sailed. And so, like, I'm always saying, if change is going to happen, it's going to be among us. And I think that in focusing on the more micro level things I just mentioned, how we experience censorship in our day-to-day lives, focusing on that, I think is a actual entry point to actually change things, because you can't work your way from the top down. You have to understand the nature of the issue at the ground level and try to, I feel like that's something you could relate to people. And just like people experience that. Like we all have been at work and felt like, damn, I can't even like be myself because I have to, like, if I don't, I'm not gonna get the paycheck. I'm not gonna be able to eat. And so like my whole thing is, can we start to politicize that? Because that's where the politics needs to shift to, in my opinion.
From the bottom up instead of the top down. Okay, I get it. I get it. I mean, I'm glad you point stuff like that out, you know.
Wait, what is G talking about?
I am not a proponent of capitalism, but I can't imagine a hospital not being open during a medical emergency because the workers felt like going home. Sometimes things need to be open to help society.
I don't. Who argues otherwise? Like, you still have hospitals in socialism. Like, I don't get the point.
Also, someone said earlier when we were talking, like, do you have any? Because I think a lot of people, like, they get mad at you because, like, you're providing something, but, like, is there anything tangible that they can do in the moment in regards to this?
Talk to people in your community about how we are so censored in our day-to-day lives, at work, at school, at church, or wherever. Like, wherever you spend most of your time, that's who you need to be talking to and with. I don't think that you can skip all of that and go straight to the, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that can happen in, let's say, in the next election cycle. So if that's what you're looking for, you have to go elsewhere on YouTube, because I don't want to lie to people. And to me, that's lying to people. So like, I don't think there's any shortcuts. I don't think there's any immediate, you can wave a wand and impose the world you want to see. No, I don't think that's the case. I think that first and foremost, we have to be able to talk to each other and understand and ask ourselves the type of world we want to see. That needs to be the first question, because you can't just fight for something without knowing what you're fighting for. And you can't just be against things. You have to be pro something. And so like, we need to be able to, this is why Tocqueville talks so much about the importance of a commons, the importance of having discourse with people to understand like how civil society, as it were, is structured. Like, I think that's what we have to do. And it sounds very basic, but that's like the basis of politics. Like, my students just had their first exams, my political philosophy class, and the first question is, what is politics? And the answer was, the politics are the actions people bring about the actions that people take to bring about the good society, or bring about what they view as the good. Now, what is the good? What's a good society is an open question, but you have to have a discourse. You have to talk to people. You have to get a sense of like how people understand the world. You have to understand what people view as possible, what they view as the horizon for change. Like, that sounds like people don't want to have it. So I was talking to my mom about this, and essentially giving this answer, saying like, that's what I feel like needs to happen. And she more or less was like, well, I don't feel like people want to do that. I'm like, exactly. That's why we have fascism, because fascism is a solution to the degradation of liberal capitalism and democracy, as it were. And so like, if we're not going to do it, that's pretty much the only option: socialism or barbarism, as I've said before. So it's our choice.
I will say though, we have all these talking heads, like, you know, on media, on the news, like, say, what's that girl's name? Candace Owens or somebody like that, where they have like just like massive followings. Like, you don't have like the wherewithal to do something like that, where you can actually, like, you know, because you actually have, you know, something of substance to say.
I honestly don't think people a lot of times want to hear what I have to say, because this is the thing. I feel it's unethical to lie to people about how politics, in the sense that we have been socialized to think of politics as just another realm of consumption, in the sense that we vote for the person we want, so the person we want can give us the things we want. Is the same kind of consumer mindset. And I think that's just so fundamentally unethical to like talk to people as though in that way, in the sense that getting people to think that they can just like vote this candidate in and see some huge wholesale change. It's just not going to happen. And I also am of the view that, as I've said before, that we have the wrong time horizon, in the sense that when we're thinking about social change, we need to be thinking in terms of centuries, not in terms of what's going to happen in the next election cycle, by the midterms of the next presidential election. That's just a very, to me, childish way to think about these things. And I read a lot of history. And so like, I'm always reading about these different movements, whether it was a civil rights movement, socialist movements in the early 20th century, the women suffrage movement, it didn't matter. All of them understood that they would not live to see the society that they were trying to bring about. They all knew that. Like, they were mature about it. And they were like, okay, we realize it's a shitty situation, but like, maybe we can get the ball rolling now. Maybe 200 years, 3 or 4 generations from now, maybe they might be able to reap the benefits. Like, you think the abolitionist movement thought that they were gonna? No, like, they knew like they were all gonna be long gone before they ever lived to see the fruits of their labor. And I know that's a tough pill for people to swallow, but I think you have to think of yourself as not just like existing now. Like, we exist in a very long stretch of recorded human history, and we're only here for but a split second. And so like, we need to be thinking in those terms, and not like, what can we do to change things tomorrow? Because that's not going to happen. And all that's going to do is like make you even more depressed, because you're going to feel like you're doing all of that for nothing. And what I'm saying is, we can do something. It's just not going to be the things that we have been socialized to think we should be doing. Because in the 1970s, there was a report published called The Crisis of Democracy, in which all of the Western leaders essentially said, okay, after the 60s and all that shit, people were taking matters into their own hand too much. So we need to take all of this out of the realm of politics and give them the illusion that they're actually changing things, but without actually changing things. It's like when you have a kid, and like I used to have like little cousins that used to want to play like PlayStation with me, and like I didn't really want them to play because they were gonna fuck shit up. And so like, I would just give them a controller, but like not plug it in. But they would still be moving the controllers and like pressing things, thinking that they were actually affecting things, when in fact I just had the computer on. That's essentially where we are with this simulation. Like, we have this illusion that this voting, all this shit is actually changing things, but it's actually not. And I want us to like accept that and say, okay, given that, what can we actually do? And that's where I'm saying the opportunity to change things is from the ground up, is to learn how to be social again. Because we actually do have to learn how to be social again. COVID fucked us up. Like, we have to learn how to be social again. We don't trust each other. We think everybody's out to get us. We think that everything is about good and evil. None of that is going to get the job done. We have to learn how to be social again and talk to people, so that we can figure out how to actually improve our communities, build organizational power, so that we can actually develop the wherewithal and develop the political power, such as the case was in the 1960s during the civil rights movement. Such was the case in the 1930s when you had a strong social democratic movement. Such was the case in the 1910s when you had a strong woman movement who said, look, there's this many of us, and we're not going to be denied, because if you deny us, like, there's going to be a price to pay, and we're nowhere near that. And so like, my whole thing is, okay, let's start working towards that, because this other thing that we've been sold about politics ain't it. Sorry, I didn't mean for that to be.
No, I mean, I also want to say, just as a video gamer, like, that was a fantastic analogy, because I used to do that to the little kids that wanted to play the game.
Right, exactly. It's just like the kid, the 2 or 3 year old kid is like, like, I'm so into this, and you're like, you ain't doing shit.
So we're just gonna look at some audience questions before we close out, y'all. Thank y'all so much for the participation. We've had like in the 80s in the room, so please make sure you like the video on your way in. Excuse me. So remember that G said something about the proponent of capitalism can't imagine the hospital being open. He wanted to clear that up. You said capitalism affects or jobs and dictates when we should be there.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that capitalism, essentially, you don't have a say in dictating these things, in the sense that, yes, we would still need hospitals and stuff in socialism, but that can be collectively decided. Like, if you like, part of the reason that these institutions are so dysfunctional is because people hate going to work because of the conditions. Because in capitalism, we can't be focused on what could actually make working conditions like good for people, such that people actually do things that in a way that doesn't exhaust them, where they don't feel like they're pulled in all sorts of directions, where they don't feel like they're ground to dust. Like, and the reason people feel that way is because there's this imperative to always make more and more and more and more. And I believe that if we didn't have that imperative to just make more and more just for the hell of it, that we could actually like take some time to like be patient with people. And like, actually, again, that may be a very like overly humanistic way of thinking about these things, and I'm open to that being the case. But yeah,
putting human needs before profit is ideal, I don't get mad at Jared. I actually agree with 80% of what he says. I admit that I am sometimes scared of socialism.
I mean, I am too, in the sense that we don't know. Like, it might be the case that this is it. Like, maybe we have reached the end of history, and that now the rest of human society is just going to be a slow kind of, sinking into the abyss. That might be the case. I don't know. I leave open that possibility. I don't think that's the case though, which is why I want to talk to people about, okay, so then if this doesn't have to be a fait accompli, if that doesn't have to be the case, what can we do so we can do something different? Because I am hopeful that that's not the case.
Jared, are you going to read and roast Kamala's book, 107 Days?
If somebody buys me a copy and sends it to me, I would definitely read it, or send me like a pirated link or something. But I'm not buying that shit.
Basically, Cash App Jared, for the book.
You Cash App me, I will absolutely buy the book, and I will post the receipt so you know that I actually used the money for that. And I will read it and I will review it.
For shits and giggles, just type in your Cash App for the people in the comments.
Okay, I'm technologically, I struggle. How do you do that?
Just type in your Cash App.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Anywho, because mine's is right here, but let me see. I think that would be fun for you to do on your own time. Like, if you want to do that on your Substack, like do a review of her book.
Okay. I don't know what my Cash App is. Oh, hold on.
I agree we need to talk to people. During COVID, a lot of my family and friends kind of scared me with their views, and I got tired debating conspiracy theories, so I kind of gave up.
No, I get it. We're down bad in the sense that we have. So one of the big ironies of the internet is that the internet has been around for let's say the original technology that became the internet its origins is back in like the 1950s. So people had kind of been thinking about there would be this world in which we were like hyper connected kind of globally. And so like when the internet apparatus, as we understand it, starts to kind of come into view, like people thought we would be more socially connected than we ever have been as a human race. And interestingly enough, I feel like we've become more antisocial, which is kind of ironic because the whole idea was that we'd be more social. And I'm always saying like, it's funny because we call it social media, but I'm like, it should be called anti-social media in the sense that we don't actually think of each other as human beings in these apps. Like we talk to people any kind of way. We get upset when people disagree with us. A lot of it too is like Meta and all these, they actually use a lot of the AI technology to create bots to kind of sow discord, because again, that's what drives impressions. That's why I'm always telling people like social media is there to get you riled up and feeling hopeless. And like just go read the business model. Like, that's what they do. Like, it's just like they want us to feel like we can't trust anybody and that everybody is out to get us. Like, it's the business model.
Yeah. And this is absolutely unrelated. It just made me think of something when you said that, like, it's anti-social media and with people angry in their opinions. But I just want to say that the level of persecution that Cardi is getting just because she is pregnant is really wild to me. And
she was getting persecuted for what?
Just because, like, she's pregnant again during her album rollout. She's about to have a tour, and she's pregnant with a guy that's probably has another baby on the way. He has certain allegations, but people are really like dragging her, like, for, I guess, being irresponsible and even questioning her motherhood. But that's a separate topic, y'all. And if you're on the Patreon tonight, I will be talking about it. So yeah, that's a whole different thing.
So I wanted to say two things. One, I tried to join the chat and then it gave me all type of errors and I didn't know how to troubleshoot that. But my Cash App is actually the same JC Tiger Fan, except just with the $, not the app, X. So it's the same thing. So if anybody, y'all want to Cash App me for Kamala's book, I will buy it. I will review it.
What is it, sir? Because someone said they're disappointing you as a millennial. It's $J.
It's literally it's the same as I have under my.
I just put in it $JC Tiger Fan.
I do want to respond to G because they said.
Yeah, I was just going down the line, but
okay, I didn't know. Okay, sorry.
But yeah, he said, I agree with that. I just don't know how socialism can solve everything. And I'm not saying that you said socialism is a cure-all.
So yeah, socialism is solving one particular thing. So like the idea behind capitalism. So I'm not anti-capitalism as much as people think. I'm not anti. Let me say one more time. I am not anti-capitalism in the sense that I think of capitalism as a historical system. So capitalism did a very particular thing. Like capitalism allowed societies to develop such that human needs could be met at scale and in a grand scale, like in a way that had never before been seen. The fact that we're doing this right now, I will give this to capitalism. Now, I think you could make an argument against that, but like I'm willing to grant that. But like running water, the light, electricity, the automobile, airplanes, all of that, I'm willing to give to capitalism in the sense that the refrigerator, things that we take for granted now is just like basic standards of living. I will grant that to capitalism. But capitalism has gotten to a point now where part of the reason it can't innovate and do these things in a way that it used to be able to is because it's exhausted kind of all of the things that are necessary to make capitalism capitalism. Capitalism needs land. We're running out of that. All of the deforestation, which is creating all sorts of climate problems. That's a huge problem. Capitalism is running out of labor, obviously, with the drop in birth rates. And obviously now part of the reason we're having so much automation is because capitalism is trying to figure out a way to do the labor that. So it just has all sorts of issues now that I don't think can be resolved. Not because people are just not trying hard enough, but because the basic tenet of the system is to just keep growing and trying to like accumulate more wealth. I'm just like, there isn't more to accumulate. That's the problem. And so the only way that capitalism can accumulate more wealth is by taking it and extracting it from people who don't have it. So like, that's why you're seeing such a rise in inequality, because capitalism is like, okay, well, we don't have the means to produce all these things like we used to because there's a shortage of land, is because we're running out of natural resources, or the natural resources would destroy the planet, i.e. oil. Then we have to get it from somewhere. So like we just extract it from the population largely through rent. So like the reason your rent has gone up so much is because that's a way for capitalism to keep going, to finding other ways to make an investment. Real estate, the reason your insurance costs are going up so much is because capitalism is just like, well, people need medical care. So like raise the price of that. Like that'd be a good way to keep, growing the economy. All of these things. And my whole thing is like, okay, as long as that's the case, capitalism is just going to keep extracting and immiserating people. So I'm like, okay, it's obvious we've gotten to the point to where we actually do produce, at least in the United States, we do produce enough for people. It's a distributional problem in the sense that because the society is so unequal, like we don't actually get a lot of things to people who do in fact need it, despite the fact that it's there in terms of the wealth. And so like socialism, all that's asking us to do is, okay, can we just ask a different question? Can we first deal with the fact that people are increasingly alienated as a result of the labor problem that I kind of explained before? Can we deal with that? And then can we actually start to ask the question, can we produce things not just for the sake of making an investment, but because people actually need it? And that's a philosophical question. It's a political question. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work. It might lead to more, it might in fact immiserate us. I don't know. So like there's reason to, I don't want to pretend like I have the answers. I don't. All I can do is think about these things and share the things that I've read and kind of other perspectives that people have had that I found interesting. Everything I've read, I always suggest here so people can see for themselves. And so I think anybody that's telling you that there's some silver bullet, like all you need to do is like tax the rich. No, that's not enough. Like, I don't want to just like lie to people and be like, socialism is the cure all. There is no cure all. And we're human. We will always, as long as we're thinking creatures, as long as we have a brain and make meaning of this thing we call the world, we will find problems. Like we all have that friend where it don't matter what the situation is at that restaurant, she gonna find something to bitch about the food. We are human. We will find something to bitch about. So my whole thing is like, okay, can we figure out a way not to bitch about this one thing? And then we can find other things to bitch about.
Well, I think we can end it there. Like, I wanted to talk about a little bit more comments, but we're at the hour mark.
Oh, sorry, y'all. I was long-winded today.
No, it's fine. I mean, look, you're passionate. I get it. But if you have any more questions for Jared, just put it in the comments section below. I check it every day. I'm sure he checks it every so often. So if you have any more questions, just put it in the comment section. Thanks, Jared, for stopping by.
Of course. I'm about to get back to grading my my students' papers.
Yeah. Just a little announcement. Ding, ding, ding. I have an announcement. You won't get that housewife reference. But tonight I'm doing 2 more videos. One on here at 9 o'clock. I'm going to be doing Real Housewives of Miami. Check that out. It's at 9 o'clock. Catch the live chat. And I'm going to do a Patreon video probably later tonight, 10 p.m. Catch that. Patreon.com/cdiggy1. But yeah, y'all. I guess we'll see y'all for the next political topic. I'm sure it'll be soon because with this president that we have, it's a new headline every motherfucking day. So,
yes, and if I might, can I just put in a shameless plug for my Substack? So,
yeah, of course.
I've been kind of, I've relaunched my Substack, and I'm kind of doing something different. I realized that we live in this post-reading society, so people don't read anymore. So like now, I've just been doing like video essays. So if you like some of the things I discuss, or even if you don't like the things I say here, but find some of the things I say at least interesting, then on my Substack, I've been doing like usually like every other week or so, I'll either do Q&As. So like you can ask questions, I'll give my thoughts about them, or I'll take a topic and just kind of expand a bit more and a little bit more academic, admittedly. But so if that's not your thing, then okay. But yeah, anyway, I was really appreciated that people could just like follow my Substack and then, the typical stuff, like and share. So
yeah. And they also asked, could you share the books that you mentioned in this episode? Just send it to me and I'll put it in the comment. The description.
Okay, I'll try to remember. I think I named like 6 or 7. So
did you in this episode?
I feel like I just was kind of like periodically dropping things.
Oh, okay.
Well, I have this one for sure. So I'll send you that one for certain. And I feel like I mentioned another private government was the other. So I'll try to remember those 2. So.
Okay, and I will put Jared's Substack link in the description below. But yeah, y'all, with that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all for the next video.